Okay, what we're going to do here is find sine inverse -1/2, and I'm going to call that theta. This is equivalent to sine theta equals -1/2. If I have sine inverse of a positive number, I look at quadrant 1, but this is sine inverse of a negative number. So where do we go if we're not looking in quadrant 1? Where are we going to go? So let me draw a picture and try to explain it through that picture. So I'm drawing a circle, and okay, I don't want to get too carried away on drawing the perfect circle. I mean, it's almost perfect from this program. Okay. So that last one was sort of poor though. Okay. So look, quadrant 1 is always a good place to look, but sine is positive in quadrant 1. Same for all the other trig functions. So what is next to quadrant 1? Which quadrant's right next to quadrant 1 where sine is positive in quadrant 1. I don't know what I just said. Sine is positive in quadrant 1. But we have sine of theta equals -1/2. What's right next to quadrant 1 where sine is negative? Quadrant 4 down here. Not quadrant 2. Quadrant 2, sine is positive. It's quadrant 4 where sine is negative. All right, and that is my reasoning of why I came up, or why I'm saying, that's my explanation, and it's the way I can remember that for sine inverse, the range is between -π/2 and π/2. Now, just from pure memorization of coordinates on the unit circle, I know that the number 1/2 goes with rad 3/2. Okay, sine is the y coordinate, and I am going to label find where the y coordinate 1/2 is. So now 1/2 goes with rad 3/2. Rad 3/2 is greater than 1/2. So if I'm only going 1/2, that's the lesser of. If I'm only going down 1/2, that means I'm going farther to the right than I am going down. So here's -1/2, and here's rad 3/2. And what I am saying, what I'm trying to get at is that you can sort of see from the shape that this is going to be -π/6. So just in terms of shapes, that's what I see, that this is -π/6. Now, another way to look at this is in terms of right triangles. But the right triangle is, I think, well, maybe I could think of it another way, but the right triangle approach is really only going to help me find the reference angle. So opposite 1 over hypotenuse 2 gives me a triangle that looks, sort of like this. And so that corresponds to π/6 or 30 degrees. But I still have to understand that if the reference angle is π/6, still it's in quadrant 4, so I have to write -π/6. Okay, so that's my answer over there, but I could also write it over here. Sine inverse -1/2 is equal to -π/6. And by the way, if you're really on top of things, sine inverse is an odd function. So sine inverse of -1/2 is actually negative sine inverse 1/2. So if you find sine inverse 1/2, put a negative in front. But I don't know if that's the best way to think of it, but you could think of it that way.